Diffusion and osmosis. The movement of substances. What is diffusion? It is the net movement of substances from a region of higher concentration to a region of lower concentration, down a concentration gradient, till equilibrium is reached. Introduction of diffusion. Concentration gradient refers to the difference in concentration between two regions, high and low concentration. Diffusion occurs in solid, liquid, and gas. How does diffusion work? Diffusion is a passive transport, therefore it does not require additional energy. Molecules are always in constant random motion, making numerous collisions. The molecules mix because of these random collisions between molecules. This continues until a uniform concentration is achieved. Let's take a look at how diffusion works in solid, liquid, and gas. Solid. Particles are held by strong intermolecular forces and tightly packed in a solid. Particles in solid are not capable of diffusing rapidly. Liquid. Particles are held by weaker intermolecular forces and able to move freely. Diffusion in liquid occurs faster than in solid. Gas. Particles are held by negligible intermolecular force and contain highest kinetic energy. Diffusion in gas occurs fastest. Diffusion in solid, lead and gold. When they are wrapped together, they will eventually be glued together due to slow diffusion of lead and gold atoms. Atoms diffuse into each other's structure, causing adhesion. Diffusion in liquid, potassium permanganate in water. From left to right, you can see that there is a uniform distribution of purple coloring from potassium permanganate in the liquid at the end of diffusion. Diffusion in gas, bromine, and air. Although bromine, the brown gas, is denser than air, diffusion can still occur. On the left you can see the bromine at the bottom before diffusion. On the right, you can see that the brown parts are more spread out after diffusion. Rate of diffusion. Rate of diffusion are affected by these factors. Steepness of concentration gradient. Mass and size of molecule. Temperature. The steeper the concentration gradient, the faster the rate of diffusion. The larger and heavier the molecule, the slower the rate of diffusion. A higher temperature increases kinetic energy of all molecules, causing diffusion to take place at a faster rate. Osmosis. It is the net movement of water molecules from a region of higher water potential to a region of lower water potential, through a selectively permeable membrane. Introduction of osmosis. Osmosis only occurs with the presence of partially permeable membrane. A membrane with very tiny holes that allow only small particles to pass through, but not large ones. For example, cell membrane, viscing tubing. Small particles that can pass through, for example, water, glucose, colored ink, and iodine. Illustration of osmosis. Water molecules will move from the left to the right of the beaker, across the partially permeable membrane via osmosis. The region on the left has low sugar concentration and high water concentration, whereas the region on the right has high sugar concentration and low water concentration. Sugar molecules are too big to diffuse across the partially permeable membrane, hence remains on right side of the beaker. Effects of osmosis on red blood cell. When water leaves the red blood cells, it shrivels and shrinks in size. When water enters red blood cell, the red blood cell swells and eventually bursts. Effects of osmosis on plant cell. When water leaves a plant cell, the cell membrane tears away from the cell wall. The cell becomes plasmolysed. When water enters a plant cell, the cell wall prevents the plant cell from bursting when water enters. The cell becomes turgid. Difference between diffusion and osmosis. Diffusion can't take place with or without a partially permeable membrane. For osmosis to occur, a partially permeable membrane must be present. Diffusion involves any substance's molecules. Osmosis is the movement of water molecules only. Importance of diffusion and osmosis. Simple organisms rely on diffusion and osmosis to survive. Nutrients, water, and oxygen move into cell via diffusion, and waste materials is removed by diffusion as well. Respiration in plants and animals. Oxygen diffuses in and carbon dioxide diffuses out of the plant-animal cell. Photosynthesis in plants. Carbon dioxide diffuses in and oxygen diffuses out. What about large organisms? They cannot survive on diffusion alone. The rate of diffusion is not fast enough to support reactions needed for life, hence they have systems. For example, digestive system and circulatory system. Now let us recap what we have learned today. Diffusion is the net movement of substance, molecules, and particles from a region of higher concentration to a region of lower concentration, down a concentration gradient. It occurs in solid, liquid, and gas. Rate of diffusion increases by these factors. Gas is faster than liquid and liquid is faster than solid. At a higher temperature, molecules move faster. Steeper concentration gradient. Lastly, when molecules are smaller and lighter. Osmosis is the net movement of water molecules from a region of higher water potential to a region of lower potential across a partially permeable membrane. Partially permeable membrane is a membrane with very tiny holes and only allows small molecules to pass through. For example, glucose can pass through partially permeable membrane, but not starch. Effects of osmosis in red blood cells. When water enters red blood cell via osmosis, the red blood cell will swell and burst. When water leaves red blood cell via osmosis, the red blood cell will shrivel and shrink in size. Effects of osmosis in plant cell. When water enters plant cell via osmosis, the plant cells become turgid, but will not burst due to presence of cell wall. When water leaves plant cell via osmosis, the cell membrane will tear away from the cell wall and cell becomes plasmolyzed. Importance of diffusion and osmosis in living organisms. Simple organisms rely on diffusion of useful materials in and waste material out of survival. Diffusion of oxygen into animal cells and plant cells. Diffusion of carbon dioxide out of animal cells and plant cells during respiration. During photosynthesis, diffusion of carbon dioxide into plant cell and removal of oxygen. Large organisms cannot survive on diffusion alone as rate of diffusion is not fast enough to support life. Hence there are systems, for example digestive system. Thank you for the effort to learn with me. Good job. That is all for today. Stay tuned for more interesting lessons from me. See you next time. Bye bye.